So our first presenter is actually on the schedule is missing. So our first presenter is going to be Luis with donations and expectations. Please, Luis, go ahead and start. And everybody else, you can mute yourself if you're not. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Piruz. Thank you very much for everyone here. Me and my co-author, Anujit, we're from the University of California, Davis, and we're presenting this donation and expectations. So first, I would like to start by framing the problem. And so I think the first thing that we should talk about is guilt. So yeah, this presentation is about expectations and donations, but one of the main aspects of it is this feeling of psychological guilt. So this emotion of that is like a reflection of oneself, and it's about basically when people think that they haven't met the expectations of someone. So these expectations can be coming from the outside, or is something that is basically from within the subject. Now the guilt aversion is it's this phenomenon in which people would like avoid getting these feelings of guilt, and it has been modeled in the framework of psychological games. It was introduced by Charles and Duffenberg, and then also like further, let's say the theory was like set down by Battigalli and Duffenberg, and it's basically that agents would care about what others are expecting of us. So this is a second order belief issue. Oh, I'm sorry. So far, all of the evidence of guilt aversion has revolved around when you have person A and person B, and person A cares about B expectations, but also choices from person A affect directly the wealth of person B. And let's say within this literature, most of the time the choices that A makes are revealed to the agent B. So what we are trying to show is that if we extend a little bit beyond this particular scenario, if we can see more evidence of guilt aversion behavior, or if there is any other phenomena that could explain this behavior. So just a very brief literature review. There was this very big challenge on the guilt aversion behavior by Ellingsen and their co-authors, in which, well, the original experiment by Duffenberg consists of this trust game. And they basically show that there is a correlation between second order beliefs and actions. But then there is this challenge that basically there is some sort of false consensus effect, in which your actions are going to be correlated to your own beliefs. And that is because you think that the other person is also thinking like you. So then there's this correlation is sort of spurious. So they have this experiment in which it's basically one of the biggest challenges to guilt aversion so far, because they don't seem to find any correlation between second order beliefs and actions. But this being said, like the second order beliefs are imputed or communicated to the other player. And there's like some other further developments along these lines, and Kalmetsky showed like in a very similar setup, they showed a presence of surprise-seeking behavior, which is exactly the opposite of guilt aversion. So guilt aversion is like there's an expectation, someone expects something from me, so then I try to deliver. But surprise-seeking behavior would be, yeah, there's this expectation, and then I would like to basically deliver above the expectation. And then that is like this behavior in which I'm looking to surprise the other person. And they introduced using strategy method for this type of games to elicit the optimal transfer as a function of second order beliefs. And they found evidence of certain types of reference dependent type of behavior in which like unfulfilling expectations seems like much worse than looking for surprise. Besides, they show evidence of like big number of people having this surprise seeking behavior. Now, just let me give you a very brief theoretical overview. So in this scenario and in the experiments, we're going to consider a dictator game in which M is the amount of money that is given to the dictator. And then she can decide to transfer the amount T. Then her second order beliefs about this transfer are donated by E. And this is basically what the dictator is inferring that the receiver is thinking that he's gonna get. So it's this functional form. So basically, whenever you deliver the expectation or above, you get rid of this penalty over here that you have when you would deliver below the expectation. So then some implication of this model is that it's never optimal to transfer above the expectation, and also the transfers are increasing in the expectation. Now, because there was this hints about this possibility of having some sort of reference dependent behavior in the previous experiments, and we basically took this a little bit more seriously. And we just introduced the following reference dependent type of utility. So we have the utility of the player, of the dictator, sorry, and then he has this function that has the usual reference dependent type. So it's concave on the gains domain and convex on the loss domain. And I think this is a typo. This should be a plus sign. So so it's a, let's say, very simple setup. No, nothing stochastic here. And the implications are that there's no transfers strictly below the reference point, except possibly for 0. And this is something that would show important. Then there's optimal transfer also increasing the expectation, and under nonlinear transfer, like sorry, if I assume this function to be nonlinear, there is a threshold in the expectations above which the person would not transfer any money. So it's some sort of threshold. If I think that your expectations are too high, then I would just transfer 0, or it's like some sort of punishment, and that is observed in, well, it can be modeled using this setup. Now in our experiment, what we did is since we're trying to extend this notion of guilt aversion to a little bit more broader spectrum, then we start with the usual dictator game, but there are some changes. So the first changer is that the receiver is not the same person who reveals the expectation, and the receiver is a charity that is selected from a menu. And then the expectations are going to be elicited from a third party. So the majority of these third party participants are college students from university clubs that are associated with charities. And then the dictator would go into, basically has to make 2 choices. First, he has to make the regular choice of a dictator game. So it's like, okay, you have this much money, how much would you like to donate? And then the second task is, okay, we're gonna tell you there is a third party, and then this third party is gonna reveal his expectations about your donation, but you are not gonna see them. So what we like you to do is you will have to choose how much would you want to donate, for this menu of expectations. So there's like there's different levels of expectations, and then the dictator would choose, oh, I want to donate this much if he is expecting that, this much if he's expecting that other thing. So it's like a strategy method on the expectations. Now there is one thing at the end of the experiment, the dictator can choose which one he would prefer to be paid with. So because the payments are going to be chosen randomly between the outcomes from the unconditional task and the conditional task, and he was basically manifest his preference to be paid using the unconditional task, which is the regular dictator, or the unconditional task. And then once he chooses, there's like an 80% chance that his choice will actually be the one that that decides the payments. And then something that is interesting is that the final transfer is never revealed to the third party. So this is a completely private situation in which the dictator knows that there are some expectations, but he will his final transfer will never be revealed. So this is what we got. We got 69 volunteer dictator pairs. The dictators are recruited from Amazon's Mechanical Turk. 49 of the volunteers, we got 49 volunteers from the college clubs, and we recruited 20 M-Turkers as volunteers. So this was like the setup that we have. Then the expectation brackets that we give to the dictator are for the conditional task, the strategy method on the expectations is 0. If the other player is expecting 0, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5, 6 or 7, 8 or more. And here on the side, I have a small screenshot of how this would look like from the dictator side. So he has this menu of these sliders, and if the volunteer gets 0, guess that the transfer is going to be 0, he can choose how much he would transfer. And this the same if the guess was 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, etc. And then the dictators will do these 2 tasks, and then as I said before, they reveal the preference. And then this is how it looks at the very end while they are about to finish. Then they are shown this screen, so they can decide, oh, I prefer to be paid under the unconditional or the conditional. And then the outcomes that we observe is dictators receive $1 as a participation fee, and they split $10. The average unconditional donation is 3.61, so that's like pretty much in line with the dictators games show. Then the average conditional donation is 3.47. Volunteers on the other side, they receive a 2.5 participation fee, and their average guess is 3.07. Then let me just show a little bit the results that we have. So we do show we do see like evidence for guilt aversion in a broader sense. Expectations do seem to matter, and we took these categories of behavior as described by Balafutas in 2017, and we categorized every dictator according to their type. So the selfish type is that he would basically give 0 regardless of the expectation. So he gives 0 in everywhere. Then unconditional altruists, they give a positive amount regardless of the expectation. The guilt-averse people would increase their donations as the expectations increase. And the negative is the surprise-seeking behavior. So this is people who, with low expectations, they would donate more, but with high expectations, they would donate less. So we observe very few of that. And the hump shape is people who would start donating very few after a certain threshold. So they would increase their donations and up to a threshold, then like decrease sharply, and then we have other. So the model person is a guilt-averse person. And what is interesting is that even though the transfer will never be shown, then they still would like to increase their donations according to what people are expecting for them. We don't see a lot of surprise-seeking behavior. And then what we have is that
Sorry, to have 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So transfers are possibly related with expectations, and most transfers are below the expectation lower limit. So these are pretty much the how donations are for every expectation, and this is a little graph of exceeded or unfulfilled expectations. So we can see over here how there's a big chunk of donations that are like below the lower threshold. Then there's some behavior that guilt aversion cannot explain, and that is that 61% of the guilt averse participants prefer to be paid by their unconditional choices. So even though these people would accommodate for the expectations, as expectation increase, they increase their donations, but still they would prefer to not care about to not be taken into account, and to be paid only with like the regular dictator game. And something that is very interesting is that we do find differentiated behavior from female participants. We do see that they are less selfish types, a little bit less guilt averse, but and all of the hump shapes that we observed are actually female participants, which we think is very, very interesting to dig into. So so the overall conclusions is that we do find evidence in favor of an extended notion of guilt aversion behavior. We find very little evidence of surprise seeking, and also like not a lot of evidence for reference dependence type of behavior. Then for further research, it's interesting that the female participants would show this hump shape behavior more often, and this would be the indication of reference dependent type of behavior, and that's something that we would like to dig in more into. So yeah, I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think let's do questions until 11:25 to go back to our timeline. Thank you for finishing early, actually. So yeah. At this point, if anybody has a question, Balon, are you moderating the questions?
So you can actually moderate questions. Participants can either unmute themselves or they can use the chat box. So it's whatever they prefer.
Okay. I will be looking at the chat box, and yeah, please go ahead and ask your questions. And if we can finish by 11:25, 26, we will be back on track with the normal timeline because we started 5 minutes late. So let me start with a clarification question if no one is asking. So Luis, just want to make sure the unconditional task, you don't announce, the volunteers have no role, right, in that task?
No, they don't have any role.
Okay, so it's just a normal, how much would you donate? And then people who are susceptible to guilt aversion, they actually don't like that situation. They like the situation where they just pick what they want on their own, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So even the guilt aversion types, they do prefer to be paid according to their decision in a traditional dictator game. So not to get involved in this expectation thing.
Were you surprised by that, or should we expect that, or what's your take on that?
Yes, I was. Let's say from an intuitive sense, behavioral is like just like from behavior. I would say that would be something that I would expect. I would expect the people if they really dislike this, let's say guilt, then they would say, no, I just prefer to go on the unconditional task. But the issue here is that if you take the model seriously, then if you provide them this menu of expectations, basically that is providing a hedge against guilt. So that means that at any point of the expectations of the opposite player, you can always end up with zero guilt because you always gave him what he was expecting. So then it's basically giving them a perfect hedge against guilt, and then people still prefer to just like go and walk out with their uncertainty of how much is being expected from them. So I think that is something that is not accommodated in the model, and yeah, that's what you said. It's in a broader sense because this is not in the model.
Thank you. That's interesting. The floor is open to questions, but I don't see anything in the chat.
I have a quick question. So, do you tell subjects that their preferred choice for payment is 80% likely to be picked for payment?
Yes, exactly. So what they see is just this box. So we explain them what's the deal, and then they choose. Okay, this is the thing. So if
so for the conditional choice, are all of these choices equally likely depending on the expectation?
Well, it depends on what their matched volunteer expected. So they are matched, volunteer and dictator, and then the volunteer is gonna say, I'm expecting 3, and then according to whatever the dictator said, when he was expecting 3, donation is gonna be 4, then that is the one that is taken into account.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, if there aren't any questions, let's move to the next presentations. Thank you, Luis, for your interesting presentation.
You're welcome, everyone.
Joshua, could you please go ahead? Yes, people are doing the emoji clapping for you.
Sure. Yeah, let me share screen here.
So the same, you have 20 minutes. I'll interrupt you 5 minutes before the end and 5 minutes for Q&A. So let's go.
Great. So let me just full screen this. Okay, so this is joint work with Andrew Jalil and Arturo Vargas Bustamante. I'm actually, this is not the original session that I was in. So this is actually not on charitable giving, so apologies about that. Hopefully it's not too off topic. But it is about pro-social behavior, so hopefully it's of interest for that reason. And this is called Eating to Save the Planet, Evidence from a Randomized Controlled Trial using individual level food purchase data. Sorry, just give me a sec here. So many are unaware of the impact of animal-based diets on the environment. 41% of the contiguous United States is used for livestock. So whenever I see this figure, it just kind of startles me. This huge fraction of land is all pasture. We got cow, sheep, goats, horses, farmstead. We have this huge fraction. Can you see my cursor, by the way? I presume you can.
Yes, we can see your cursor.
Okay, great. So you could see this huge fraction here is for livestock feed, and here's feed exports here. In comparison, the land that we use for plant-based food that we eat is just this square here, right? Relatively much smaller. And I think this is, you know, I'm just always struck by this figure. It's just quite dramatic. And there's natural environment consequences of this, right? So in terms of biomass, of all the mammals on planet Earth, 96% are livestock or humans. Only 4% are wild animals. So the breakdown is 60% livestock, 36% humans. For birds, it's similar. 70% of all the biomass of birds is poultry, only 30% are wild. And consequently, there's going to be, because, you know, animal agriculture is just such a large portion of the biota on planet Earth, it's going to have large environmental impacts. So the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations estimates, the FAO estimates 14.5% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions comes from livestock. That's larger than the entire transportation sector. Animal agriculture is responsible for 20 to 33% of freshwater consumption. And it's estimated that 70% of destroyed Amazon forest has been converted for grazing, while another 21% of the destroyed Amazon rainforest is used for animal feed. Given existing trends, by 2050, greenhouse gases from food production and land clearing are projected to grow by 80%. And the impact on the environment extends to the oceans as well. So an estimated 2.7 trillion animals are pulled from the ocean each year. Many fisheries are in decline due to overfishing, while demand is increasing. In contrast, plant agriculture for human consumption is vastly more efficient, producing anywhere from 2 times to 160 times less CO2 equivalents per gram of protein produced. So if we could find ways that effectively reduce demand for meat, consumption would, this could be win-win, because we could reduce carbon output to the atmosphere, reduce the degradation of the natural environment, reduce the suffering of billions of farm animals raised in factory farms, and potentially combat the obesity epidemic and high incidence of chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. The challenge is on the demand side, and that's to change deeply ingrained habits, and that's a tricky thing to do. So related literature, I'll just go over this very briefly, but well, there's nothing to go over really. So there's little direct evidence on the effectiveness of interventions to decrease the demand of meat. There's many studies in these reviews about data in which researchers are using survey evidence, but in terms of actual real purchase consumption or real observed consumption, there's only these 2 contemporaneous papers, Schwitzgebel and Garnett. Both of these are published. Actually, the paper I'm presenting here is also just recently published as well. So Schwitzgebel, they do an intervention on in the classroom in philosophy class about the ethics of eating meat. Garnett, they expand the selection of plant-based options in a college dining hall. Both find that these interventions are quite effective at decreasing meat consumption. So, okay, so what did we do? We conducted a guest lecture at a college in Econ 1 class, randomized at the classroom level. It was conducted the week of October 17, 2017. This is 1 month into the fall semester, which establishes a baseline diet. We had 10 classes, 5 are control, 5 treatment, 215 students total, with about 220 purchases per student. So in total, we have close to 50,000 meals purchased. Our intervention, we had a placebo control intervention where we gave a guest lecture on inequality. This is predicted to have no effect on what people eat. And then we had the treatment lecture. This is a guest lecture on the effect of one's diet on climate change. Subjects signed consent forms. They knew they were in a study, but they weren't quite sure what it was about. Both conditions filled out initial surveys. The treatment condition had an additional survey after the intervention, and then a follow-up survey 1 month later. The survey was designed to better understand the mechanism. Hopefully I'll have a little bit of time to talk about it, but I might need to skip it. So this is an example of a control slide. So this is Piketty and Saez. It says, this shows how income shares change over time. Nothing about food, nothing about greenhouse gas emissions or global warming or anything like that. Here are the treatment slides. So we show that the trends in global temperatures over time, and that we have this strong trend of global warming. We show salient pictures that show the effects of global warming, like droughts. We then try and connect this to food for the students. So remember, this is a 15-minute guest lecture in Econ 1. And so we connect people's food choices. This infographic here connects food choices and makes it analogous to what's the CO2 equivalent in terms of driving a vehicle. And as you could see, on the left-hand side, sort of low impact, you have mostly plant-based products, some dairy. And on the right-hand side, you have your meat products. We try and connect this to authoritative figures like, for example, this researcher at Oxford, who's the director of the Food Climate Research Network. We provide a BBC podcast interview with her. We then try and make, this is a little bit heavy-handed, but we try and make the information highly actionable and salient. So we say, look, there's this food station, for example, in the college dining hall called Homestyle. And they might offer a meal that has mashed potatoes and broccoli. And there's one option where the main is a portobello mushroom, and there's another option where the main is this steak. Which one has the lower CO2 footprint? Yes, correct. The portobello mushroom one, right? And so, kind of obvious, we're just kind of hammering it home. And we do a few examples like this just so that, to make it salient and to make it memorable. Now, in the intervention immediately, what a lot of people's first reactions are is, well, meat is a great source of protein. How can I be healthy without eating meat? And so, we go over some of the health information as well. So we say, well, actually, a lot of kinds of meat are associated with cancer. Processed meats are considered a group one, a very likely cause of cancer. Red meat is somewhat likely to cause cancer. So actually reducing meat consumption is probably better for one's health. And then, people have a lot of stereotypes about, reducing meat and still being fit and able to be athletic. And so then we go over a few examples of, for example, the Williams sisters are these top-notch athletes who actually have all vegan diets, and they're able to perform. They actually claim that they perform at a high level because of their diet. And we have, bodybuilders, and these guys are all plant-based bodybuilders. So it's, you don't need the meat necessarily to do for your athletics or for your health. So that's basically the summary of the intervention. Data. So students purchase meals in the campus dining hall with ID card swipes. So we track all purchases in the main dining hall over the course of the year. The purchases are a la carte. We collaborate with the dining services. So they even redesigned the layout of the register for us. It was really nice of them. The nice thing about this dining hall is that they always have at least one vegetarian option for every meat option. They have a vegetarian option put aside. So having a vegetarian meal is very doable. Though, we do mention sort of the vegetarian a bit in the lecture. The emphasis is on meat reduction. So, people could just eat like less meat meals and do some mixture, not necessarily going entirely vegetarian. Okay, so now coming to the data. So this is to show that our randomization worked. So the difference in gender across the two groups and race and age are not significant. So the randomization seemed to work. The randomization didn't entirely give us perfect balance here. On the other hand, we do. So here, this is going to be these are going to be our four main outcome variables of interest. We're looking at whether a particular meal falls into one of these four categories, which is beef, poultry, or fish. If it's beef or poultry or fish, we use the indicator meat. And then there's two other categories: salad bar and veg. Veg is for vegetarian meals. The salad bar is sort of the remainder. We don't look at salad bar. It's a little bit ambiguous because salad bar is mostly vegetarian, but they do have meat at the salad bar. Since we can't observe that, we don't really emphasize analysis on that. So these are the four categories that we look at: meat plus veg. The remainder there is the salad bar. So those three things should, the proportions of those three things add up to 1. And we do see that in our pre-intervention period, the treatment groups are a little bit lower in the meat consumption, a little bit higher a little bit lower in the meat consumption, a little bit lower in beef. That's fine. All of our results are going to be difference in difference anyway, so it shouldn't make too big of a difference. Okay, these are some survey variables. I don't really have time to go over that. Okay, so here's the result in one figure. Our intervention is October 17th. Here is the pre-intervention period. This is the control group. This is the treatment group. As you can see, the treatment and control, there are pre-existing differences. But after the intervention, we have this quite stark drop in meat consumption. This is the proportion of meals that are meat. We have a quite stark drop in the proportion of meat consumption in the treatment group and no drop in the control group. That drop persists over time.
You have 5 more minutes. So.
Thank you. That drop does persist over time, though it does seem to attenuate. If we look at vegetarian consumption, the vegetarian meals, we see similar. This is the treatment group. We see a drop, but in the control group, no change. Here are the regression results. We find that the intervention reduces beef consumption by the probability of eating a beef-based meal by 2.3 percentage points, poultry and fish by 2.5 percentage points, meat by 4.6 percentage points, and increases the probability of eating a vegetarian meal by 4.2 percentage points. This is over the full semester. In this model, we're including individual date and hour fixed effects. Of course, we cluster our standard errors by the unit of randomization here, which is the classroom. Now, we could disaggregate these results by semester. Okay, these are, by the way, these are Logit average marginal treatment effects here. So these are percentage point effects. And here, what we could see is that the treatment effect in the first semester, the semester of the intervention, 6.1 percentage point decrease in meat consumption. Second semester, 3.5 percentage point decrease in meat consumption. So the treatment effect is much bigger in the first semester. There is some attenuation, but it's still present there in that second semester. And this is off a base of 61% probability of eating a meat-based meal. So this is roughly a 10% decrease in meat consumption the first semester. And it's about something like 6 percentage points, 7%, something like that. Sorry, not percentage point, but 6 or 7% decrease in meat consumption in the second semester. Now, what we could also do their pre-intervention probability of eating meat, and then we take their post-intervention probability of eating meat. We take the delta, the difference between those two things, and now we plot the delta, the distribution of the delta over all individuals. And these are the CDFs of the within-person change of meat consumption. Okay, so this light blue is the CDF of within-person change of the control group. And you could see if first-order stochastic dominates the change for the treatment group. So the treatment group is just fully shifted to the left. So they all eat less meat. So the treatment group, assuming that the intervention isn't changing the order of these individuals, it's basically working on everybody. Though it's working, as you can see, the gap isn't so big here. It's much bigger here at the tails. It's more effective on the people who would have otherwise trended down in meat. Same thing for veg. Okay. Here we do heterogeneous treatment effects. We look at the treatment effects by gender. Here we see the treatment effect for men, 3.4 percentage points. Here's the treatment effect for women, 6.3 percentage points. As you can see, the effect for women is about twice the size as the effect for men. Women are mostly driving the result here. I think that's quite interesting. You know, we could hypothesize about what that might be, but I'll just sort of leave that result for you to interpret. For race, we also look at white versus non-white. For some reason, the entire effect is driven by white, no effect from non-white. Again, you know, we could speculate, but no ex-ante hypothesis. Now I'm almost out of time here, so I'll just conclude. These are survey variables, and we interact that with the treatment variable to see what survey variables are more likely to predict bigger treatment effects or lower treatment effects. And what we find is that those who already exhibited some concern about the environment had bigger treatment effects. Those who said that they were persuaded or motivated by the intervention had bigger treatment effects. But those who said that the intervention taught them new information, or in other words, the information was new to them, had smaller treatment effects. So I think for me, our interpretation is that the overall takeaway here is that the intervention worked more effectively on people who are already sort of had a proclivity to reduce their meat. People for whom this was new information exhibited smaller treatment effects. Okay, I'm over time, so I'll just end on that. Stop my share. There we go.
Thank you, Joshua. So let's move on to the Q&A. Anybody who has a question can just unmute yourself and ask, or if you prefer, you can type it in the chat.
Hi, Joshua. This is Luis. I just have a quick question. Like, do you have any hypothesis as to why, like, this, like, new, for the people who all this information is new, they have the smallest effects? Like, is there something like educational, or like, do you have like more information about this?
Yeah, I mean, the impression that we get, I mean, this is our interpretation. We don't fully know. This is just a story we're telling, but I think what it is, I talked to a psychologist who works on behavior change, and he works on like advertisements to convince youth not to do drugs. Okay, and they have this whole way to think about things that latitude of change, and that are stages of change, and people are in different stages of change. And so there's people who are like, who hear the message, they don't even believe climate change. So for them, there's just not going to be any effect. You have other people who are already like very close, like maybe they already heard the story. They already knew that animal agriculture has a big negative effect on climate change. And so they just needed that little push to get them moving. And the thing is, this kind of is a little push. So we would expect, it could be the case that some interventions are more effective on the people earlier in the stages of change, like further back. But I think like little kind of like, kind of soft 1 hour interventions, little pushes like this are, I guess are, it could have gone either way, but our interpretation is it seems to be affecting those people who are sort of on the margin, right? Who are already already had in their mind that maybe this is something that they wanted to do, and then we moved them across the line. So that's what we think is going on, but yeah, probably more research is needed to say definitively.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
Thanks. Good question.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Joshua. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
With that, we move to the next presentation, which is me. Who's going to be controlling the time for me? Are you going to do that?
I could do it if you would like.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Joshua can do it. It seems like Christopher hasn't showed up, so I think we're gonna end up finishing early.
Okay. So I will move to my presentation. Share screen. Okay. Close this. And okay. Should I start?
Go for it.
Okay. So hello, I am Piruz Savuri, and this is joint work with Silvana Krasteva and Marco Palma at Texas A&M University. I'm today going to talk to you about leadership gifts. So a leadership gift in fundraising is basically a public commitment by a large donor to give to a charitable cause, and is commonly used in fundraising campaigns in order to induce donations by downstream donors. It usually comes in two main forms, either in the form of an unconditional lump sum gift that we call seed money, an example of which you can see in this screenshot from Texas A&M Foundation, where a large $2 million donation is announced, or in the form of what we call matching gift, which is a commitment to match downstream donations by a fixed ratio. An example of that you can see in this other screenshot on the right, where a one-to-one match is announced on the GE General Electric website. Both of these are commonly used in charitable fundraising, but the question that we are going to investigate in this study is which one of these two schemes is more effective in raising funds. There is a theory that tells us that under complete information, when the quality of the public good provided by charity is observable, matching should outperform seed money because it alleviates the free rider problem due to its conditional nature, as opposed to seed money that actually theoretically is predicted to exacerbate the free rider problem. However, there is a later theory that actually we have worked on, and we show that with under incomplete information, when the quality of public good is not readily observable and information acquisition is costly, then the choice of seed money as opposed to matching becomes a signal of quality and results in seed money raising more funds compared to matching. In terms of experimental evidence, it has been found that seed money on average raises more funds compared to matching gift in the field, which is consistent with the second theory. And specifically in one study where Rondeau and List compared the two schemes both in the lab and in the field, they find that seed money raises more funds compared to matching in the field, but not in the lab. And they speculate that there's the key difference is information, in that the quality of the public good is observable in the lab, but not in the field. And so in the field, some sort of signaling might be going on, which is consistent with theory I described. However, there does exist an important gap between existing theories and experiments, and that is that in experimental studies, the experimental exogenously changes the leadership gift, while in theoretical models entail an endogenous choice of the leadership gift and form by strategic players. So in order to make a more direct investigation of existing theories and compare the two schemes at their equilibrium levels of leadership gift as opposed to arbitrary levels, we have designed a three-player induced value public good in the lab with a fundraiser, a lead donor, and a follower donor. And we have focused on the first theory. We want to investigate the first theory that is about information symmetry, and thus in our game, everybody observes the MPCR of the public good in the lab. What we have found is that in fact, matching raises contributions 10% more than seed money. And interestingly, under matching, the leader gives less compared to seed money, while the follower actually compensates that and gives significantly more under matching, resulting in matching on average raising more funds compared to seed money. But curiously, we find that only about a third of fundraisers choose matching. And something that kind of surprised us was that we found that there's a gap evolves between genders at the beginning of the experiment, the two genders actually are similar in their choice of scheme, but females gradually convert to choosing matching much more than males who do not basically change their choice over time. So let's go to the details. The game, as I said, is a three-player game. There's a fundraiser in the lab. We call her player one. She seeks contributions for a group project from the other two players that are the donors. She starts with nothing, and her payoff is basically what she raises. She observes the public goods MPCR, and she chooses the fundraising scheme between seed money and matching. Then there are the two other players, the lead donor and the follower donor. In the lab, we call them player two and player three. They sequentially contribute to the public good, and they each initially start with 40 tokens of endowment, and their monetary payoff is basically what they keep plus the returns from the group project. They observe both the project's MPCR and the scheme chosen by the fundraiser. Moreover, the follower, the second donor, the third player, she also observes the lead donor's decision before making her own contribution decision. The payoff of the public good is this function you see here, this VG, which is a piecewise linear function with the MPCR being 0.7 up to 40 tokens, and 0.1 after that up to 80 tokens, which is the max possible contribution is if everybody contributes all of their endowment. You can see that up to 40, the MPCR is above 0.5 but below 1, so it's not individually rational to give, but it is jointly efficient. Above that, it's neither individually rational nor jointly efficient to give. Now, what does theory predict is that under seed money, where the lead donor chooses a lump sum contribution and then observing that the follower chooses her own lump sum contribution, the follower's payoff, if we look at only the monetary payoff, which is wealth minus what they give plus the returns from the public good, that is in fact decreasing in giving because the MPCR is below 1. However, observing the lead donor's contribution, the follower might feel some disutility from giving below the leader due to some social pressure, and the extent of that social pressure is captured by this coefficient S, which varies by individual. And if that susceptibility to social pressure is above a certain threshold, then the follower's utility, the follower's utility maximizing choice is to match the leader's gift. Otherwise, she's just better off giving nothing. Now, anticipating this behavior, the lead donor doesn't observe S, but has a perception about its distribution. And if the lead donor's perceived probability of the follower being susceptible to social pressure is above a certain threshold, then the leader would want, it's in her best interest to give a positive amount of leadership gift to induce some pressure, social pressure on the downstream donor. Otherwise, the leader is better off giving nothing, rendering the follower not to give anything either. So the level of public good under seed money depends on both the susceptibility of social pressure of the follower and the leader's perception of the probability of that happening. Under matching, the leader chooses a match ratio, and observing that the follower chooses her own lump sum contribution, and things are more straightforward in a mathematical sense, in the sense that, first of all, there's no observed leadership gift. The leadership gift is a function of the follower's gift, so there's no social pressure. So the follower would just maximize her payoff, which is what she keeps plus the returns from the public good. However, because of the match ratio, the marginal per capita returns of the public good is inflated, and so if the match ratio is above a certain threshold, then the giving is payoff increasing for the follower. And we show that in fact, in equilibrium, it is in the best interest of the leader to choose a match ratio high enough, just high enough to induce giving by the follower. Now, if you compare these two situations, it seems that the coefficient S and the match ratio M have a similar role in the sense that they both induce giving and deter free riding by inflating the MPCR. However, susceptibility to social pressure does not happen to all followers, so it happens with some probability. So not all followers give in response to leadership gift, while a high enough matching ratio makes it payoff maximizing for all followers to give, and thus matching theoretically is predicted to raise more money or no less money than seed money. And the weakly here corresponds to the limiting case where all followers are susceptible to social pressure, where matching and seed coincide. Moreover, under seed money, the lead donor, when she gives to induce social pressure, the follower responds with some probability. So on average, the follower gives less than the lead donor, while the opposite happens in matching because the optimal match ratio is below 100%, so the follower ends up giving more than the leader. So theoretically, we should expect the follower to give more under matching, while the lead donor, conditional on giving something, gives more under seed money. We implement this in the lab using these earnings tables. And the first thing we do is to simplify the game by discretizing the choice set for the leader and the follower to multiples of 10 tokens. So the leader basically chooses rows and the follower chooses columns. And the players observe this table while playing the game. In matching, we do the same thing. except in matching, the leader doesn't choose the lump sum amounts, but in order to have the same number of choices, we discretize the percentage choices to multiples of 25%, between 0 and 100. And moreover, when you multiply a percentage by a contribution by the follower, the result may not be a round number, so we round down the results to the nearest multiple of 10 so that the contribution amounts are consistent between the two schemes. And we color code the payoffs for each player in each box. And as you can see here, the top number is the total funds raised, the payoff of player 1. The bottom left, the blue, is payoff of player 2, and this is the payoff of player 3. Now, our theoretical predictions here translate into, under seed money, if the leader expects the follower to not be very likely to be susceptible to social pressure, then the leader gives nothing, so does the follower, and there's no contribution. Otherwise, the leader, in order to exert social pressure, contributes 20 tokens, and the followers who are susceptible to social pressure match that. Followers who are not susceptible to social pressure do not match that, and so both of these could happen based on the distribution of follower types. In reality, we expect to see a weighted average of all these 3 boxes. In matching, things are more straightforward. The payoff maximizing choice for the leader is 50 or 75% match, and the follower responds by maximizing the payoff at 20 tokens. The only reason there are 2 boxes here is the result of rounding, where you see that we have 2 strategies that are payoff equivalent. Now, we implement this in the lab with 3 treatments. In the first 2 treatments, exogenous seed and match, the contribution form, we fix the contribution form, not the contribution amount, exogenously to seed or match in order to compare the 2 schemes' fundraising effectiveness. And then we have a third treatment where the full game is played and the fundraiser chooses a scheme to investigate the preference over schemes by the fundraiser. We hypothesize that the total contributions in the exogenous seed treatment do not exceed total contributions in the exogenous match treatment. The follower donor contributes more in the exogenous match treatment than the exogenous seed treatment, and the fundraiser is more likely to choose matching than seed money in the endogenous scheme treatment. We did this in Texas A&M Human Behavioral Lab in April and November 2019. This is before all these COVID-19 things happened, so it was easy to conduct in that sense. We recruited almost 400 undergraduate students at Texas A&M, and in each session, the game was repeated 10 times. What we found—
5 minutes.
Thank you. So what we found that was, first of all, on average, matching raised more funds compared to seed money, and it stayed more or less above seed money throughout the game, as you see on the right. These are the 10 rounds of the game. However, you can see that under seed money, there is a lot of giving and the gap is small. And I said that conditional and giving in seed money, we should expect the lead donor to have given more in seed money compared to matching, and that was indeed the case. Moreover, we hypothesized that the follower should give significantly more under matching, and that was also the case. And you can see that the gaps are rather consistent over time. But what about the distribution of giving? Is that consistent with our theory? So, as I said, the lead donor, depending on her perception of the follower's susceptibility to social pressure, should give either 0 or 20, and in fact, those were the 2 most popular choices. Here is the distribution of lead donors' choices, and 0 and 20 were 2 most popular choices, and 20 was actually the most popular choice, which corresponds to lead donors that should expect the follower donor to be susceptible to social pressure. So we go to the distribution of follower types, and we see what percentage matched the lead donor as opposed to giving more than the lead donor or less than the lead donor. And in fact, those who matched the lead donor or gave more, which corresponds to those who were susceptible to social pressure, were above 50%, which is way above our 3/7 or 43.7% threshold. So the majority were right, or to be more accurate, the plurality were right to expect the follower to be susceptible to social pressure. Under matching, I said that the most the payoff maximizing choices were 50 and 75, and 50 was the most popular choice. And if you look at the followers, we divided them by those who chose the payoff maximizing choice, as opposed to giving more than that or giving less than that. And you can see that more than 3/4 of the followers actually chose the payoff maximizing choice. So anticipating that, 50 was the payoff maximizing choice. So it seems like our theoretical prediction are consistent with what we observed. In terms of the choice of scheme, that was not what we predicted as much. As you see, on average, about 1/3 of observations entailed choosing matching, and there was quite a bit of zigzagging around that. But what was more surprising to us was the distinction by gender. When we separate by gender, you can see that females, this solid line, gray solid line, their probability of choosing matching gradually increases over time. And in fact, in these last 3 rounds, they are not significantly different from 0.5. However, males, they are the ones who are deriving the zigzagging. They don't gravitate towards matching. It looks like they're dropping, but this is not statistically significant. We thought maybe the reason is females paying attention, but we had eye tracking data and we analyzed that, but we didn't find any significant difference between males and females in visual attention. In terms of mathematical abilities and cognitive reflection, in fact, females scored 1 point less than males, but cognitive reflection score was not a predictor of the probability of making, if you will, the right choice, which is matching. So we believe that learning by females can potentially explain, but this is our speculation. We tested the data formally, and we have found that initially there was no statistically significant difference between genders. Time had no effect on males, but it did have an effect of increasing the probability of choosing matching for females as the game progressed. These are, by the way, clustered over individual and control for everything. So in summary, matching seems to outperform seed money. Specifically, matching alleviates the free rider problem and results in higher contribution by the follower donor per dollar of leadership gift. And that's specifically important because in our study, we had like 1 leader and 1 follower. In reality, there is 1 leader and many followers. So the fact that the followers give more under matching, that becomes more important and salient in reality, or in the wild, if you will. However, fundraisers do not choose matching more than half of the time. Nonetheless, females increasingly become likely to choose matching, not the male, and learning could be a plausible explanation. Obviously, the fundraiser behavior there's much more room to study the fundraiser behavior, which is kind of understudied in the experimental literature for good reasons. Also, I want to remind you that this is a lab experiment under full information. So these results, this full information plays a strong role in the results. And actually, our next step is we are currently working on a follow-up experiment where we want to take this away and vary the information structure to see what that does to the comparison between schemes. And we are thankful to iFree for providing the funds for that, even though currently due to the COVID restrictions, we haven't been able to conduct experiments, and we are waiting for things to change, hopefully for the better. Thank you. That is all I have. And please, I'm happy to hear your comments and questions.
Questions?
Hi, Pirus. This is Luis. I found your result on the female part very interesting. And a couple of weeks ago, I was just learning. I was just reading about this paper that seems to suggest. I just don't remember the name of the paper. I was trying to look it up right now, but I couldn't find it. It seemed to suggest that men wouldn't update beliefs as quickly, but I cannot find it.
I would be happy to if you could share it with me. Let me write a note for myself to ask you to please, if you could.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up because like I was like as soon as you said it, it's like I was reminded of this one. I'm gonna look it up.
So yeah, that's what we observe. It seems like men, at least in our study, they don't reflect on what happened during the experiment. They stick to what they did, but women are updating. So this is very interesting. It seems consistent with what you are. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any more? Let me move to my conclusion slide. Okay.
Okay, so if there is no more questions, we can conclude the session since our very first presenter also didn't show up. Thank you everyone for attending. I will go ahead and end this meeting and see you around in the rest of the sessions for the conference.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Valon. Thanks everybody for attending.
Bye.
Yeah. Goodbye. So Valon, you are good?
Oh, yes.
So yeah, a few sentences of pleasantry before I leave. How's everything?
It was good. It was smooth. Actually, I was very happy with how you moderated. So we have a WhatsApp group for us graduate student helpers, and I was saying that my moderator is doing an excellent job.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, how's life? I am sorry I haven't been catching up with you.
So this is recorded by the ESA Executive Committee.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay.
I think we should chat another time.
Yeah, sure.
To continue with.
I forgot about that.
Organizing everything.
Thank you for. Yeah, you take care.
Okay, you too.
Take
Bye.
care.